He threw my clothes in the rain. This house is for my new woman. Get lost. The mistress laughed from the window. I left silently and made just one call. 3 days later, they woke up to violent banging on the door. My husband's smile died when he faced the court officer. He wasn't there to arrest anyone. He just asked one simple question about the property that made my husband look at his mistress, turn paper white, and collapse to the floor.
Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching.
He threw my clothes in the rain. This house is for my new woman. Get lost. The mistress laughed from the window. I did not cry. I did not scream. I simply bent down and picked up the one thing that mattered. My phone. The rain was coming down hard that October evening in Savannah. The kind of rain that soaks through everything in seconds, that turns the historic streets into rivers and makes the Spanish moss drip like tears from the old oak trees. My clothes were scattered across the front lawn. 40 years of marriage reduced to a pile of wet fabric on grass that I had planted myself in front of a house that George had never owned a single brick of. He did not know that. He had never known that. And in 3 days, he was going to find out in the worst possible way. Did you hear me? George stood in the doorway, his face red with the kind of righteous anger that only a guilty man can muster. I said, "Get out. This is my house now, mine and Ashley's." Ashley. The woman leaning out of the second-floor window, wearing my silk robe, the one my mother had given me for my 50th birthday. She was 34 years old, blonde, pretty in a hard sort of way. She had been George's secretary for 2 years before she became his mistress. I had known about the affair for 18 months. I had done nothing about it because I was waiting for the right moment, waiting for George to make the mistake that would justify everything I was about to do. Throwing me out of my own house was that mistake. "Are you deaf?" George took a step toward me. The rain was soaking through his shirt, but he did not seem to notice. "I want you gone. Tonight. Take your garbage and get out of my life." I looked up at him, at this man I had been married to for 38 years, at the father of my son, at the person who had shared my bed, eaten my cooking, spent my money, and never once bothered to ask whose name was actually on the deed to this house. "All right, George," I said. My voice was calm, steady. "I'll go." His face flickered with surprise. He had expected a fight. He had expected tears, screaming, threats. That was what he had prepared for. That was the scene he had rehearsed in his head. But I was not going to give him the satisfaction. Just like that? He sounded almost disappointed. Just like that. I bent down and picked up my phone from where it had fallen among my scattered clothes. The screen was wet, but still working. I wiped it on my sleeve and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for, Raymond Brooks, attorney at law. Raymond had been my family's lawyer for 43 years. He had handled my parents' estate when they died. He had drawn up the documents that protected everything they left me. He had kept those documents safe in his office for nearly 4 decades, waiting for the day I might need them. That day had finally come. "Who are you calling?" George demanded. "If you're calling a lawyer, you're wasting your time. I talked to my guy already. Tennessee is an equitable distribution state. I'm entitled to half of everything." "We live in Georgia, George." Same thing. It was not the same thing. Not even close. But I did not correct him. I just pressed the call button and lifted the phone to my ear. Raymond answered on the second ring. "Patricia, I've been expecting your call. It's time," I said. "I understand. I'll have everything ready. 3 days. 3 days. Do you have somewhere safe to stay? I'll manage. Call me if you need anything. Anything at all." I ended the call and put the phone in my pocket. George was staring at me with a mixture of confusion and contempt. "That's it? That's your big plan? Call some lawyer who's going to tell you the same thing mine told me?" He laughed. It was an ugly sound. "Face it, Patricia. You've got nothing. This house, the cars, the investments, I'm taking half of everything, and there's nothing you can do about it." From the window above, Ashley giggled. "Bye-bye, Grandma. Don't let the door hit you on the way out." I looked up at her. At this woman who thought she had won, who thought she was moving into a mansion, marrying a wealthy man, starting a glamorous new life. She had no idea what she had actually gotten herself into. "Enjoy the house," I said. "While you can." I walked away. Down the long driveway, past the wrought iron gates my grandfather had commissioned in 1952, onto the rain-slicked streets of Savannah's historic district. I did not look back. I did not need to. I knew exactly what was coming. The Morgan house, except it was not the Morgan house, had never been the Morgan house, sat on a corner lot at the edge of Forsyth Park. 3 stories, wraparound porches, original hardwood floors, and a garden that had been featured in Southern Living magazine twice. George thought it was worth about $1.2 million. He was wrong. The last appraisal, conducted privately by Raymond 6 months ago, had valued it at $2.4 million. Historic properties in Savannah had doubled in value over the past decade, but the value was not the point. The point was ownership, and George Morgan had never owned a single square inch of that property. My maiden name was Patricia Ann Whitfield. My family had lived in Savannah since before the Civil War. My great-grandfather had built that house in 1892. My grandfather had maintained it through the Depression. My father had raised me there, and when he died in 1986, he left it to me in a trust that specifically excluded any future spouse. George and I had gotten married in 1987. He moved into the house 2 weeks after the wedding. He had assumed, without ever asking, that marriage meant ownership, that my home became his home, that my family's legacy was now his to control. For 38 years, I let him believe that. I never corrected him when he called it our house or talked about our property. I never showed him the trust documents. I never mentioned that every bill, every tax payment, every insurance premium had been paid by an account he had no access to. Because I loved him. Because I wanted to believe that the man I married was better than his assumptions. Because I hoped that someday he would love the house the way I did, would see it as a home rather than an asset. But he never did. He saw it as money, as status, as something to be leveraged and exploited. And now he saw it as something to be taken from me and given to a woman half his age. The rain had slowed to a drizzle by the time I reached the Marriott on Bay Street. I checked in using a credit card George did not know I had. I asked for a room with a view of the river and paid for 3 nights in advance. The room was clean and quiet. I stood at the window and watched the ships moving slowly up the Savannah River. Cargo vessels heading to the port. Tour boats returning from evening cruises. The normal rhythms of a city that did not know or care that my life had just been upended. Except it had not been upended. It had finally been set right. I called Raymond again. "I'm at the Marriott," I said. "Bay Street." "Good. Do you need anything tonight?" "I just want to sleep. Tomorrow we'll go over everything. I'll bring the documents. All of them." "Thank you, Raymond. Patricia." His voice was gentle. "I've known you since you were a little girl. I handled your father's affairs for 30 years. I made him a promise when he died that I would protect you. This is me keeping that promise." I felt tears prick at my eyes. Not sad tears. Something else. Relief, maybe. Or the release of a weight I had been carrying for years without realizing it. "My father would have liked this," I said. "He never trusted George." "He didn't. That's why he structured the trust the way he did." Raymond paused. "Get some sleep. The next few days are going to be busy." I hung up and sat down on the hotel bed. My clothes were still wet. My hair was plastered to my head. I probably looked like a drowned rat, but I was smiling. 3 days. In 3 days, George would wake up to a knock on the door. He would open it expecting a delivery, or maybe a neighbor, or perhaps even me coming back to beg for forgiveness. Instead, he would find Deputy Sheriff Tom Henderson, holding a clipboard and asking one simple question. "Sir, can you confirm who is the legal owner of this property?" And George, who had never once bothered to look at a deed or a title or any document related to the house he thought was his, would not be able to answer, because the answer was me. It had always been me. And now, after 38 years, it was time for the truth to come out. I took a shower, changed into the hotel bathrobe, and ordered room service. A steak, Medium rare, with a glass of wine. Comfort food for the first night of my new life. When the food arrived, I sat by the window and ate slowly, watching the lights of the ships on the river. Thinking about nothing, enjoying the silence. My phone buzzed. A text from Kevin, my son. "Mom, Dad just called. He says you left. What's going on?" I typed back, "Call me tomorrow. I'll explain everything. Are you okay?" "I'm better than I've been in years." I turned off the phone and finished my dinner. Tomorrow I would deal with Kevin. Tomorrow I would deal with the documents and the lawyers and the complicated process of reclaiming what had always been mine. But tonight, I was going to sleep. Really sleep, for the first time in months. The rain had stopped, the sky was clearing, and somewhere across town, in a house that was not his, George Morgan was celebrating his victory with a woman who did not know she had already lost. 3 days, just 3 more days. And then the truth would finally come out. Raymond's office had not changed in 40 years. The same dark wood paneling, the same leather chairs, the same portrait of his father, the original Raymond Brooks hanging behind the desk. Even the smell was the same: old books, pipe tobacco, and the faint mustiness of documents that had been stored for decades. I sat across from Raymond the morning after George threw me out. The sun was shining through the tall windows, making dust motes dance in the air. It felt strange, being here in this quiet, dignified space after the chaos of the night before. "Coffee?" Raymond asked. "Please." He poured from a silver pot that his wife had given him for their 25th anniversary. His wife was gone now, dead for 8 years. Raymond had never remarried. He said once that he did not see the point of loving someone new when he still loved someone old. I understood that sentiment better now than I had then. "So," Raymond said, settling into his chair with his own cup, "tell me everything." I told him. About Ashley. About the affair I had known about for 18 months. About George's increasing coldness, his late nights, his sudden interest in protecting our assets through financial arrangements I was not allowed to see. About the rain, the clothes on the lawn, the laughter from the window. Raymond listened without interrupting. When I finished, he set down his coffee cup and opened a drawer in his desk. "I've been waiting 38 years to show you this," he said. He pulled out a folder. Thick, yellowed with age, held together with a rubber band that had long since lost its elasticity. "Your father gave me this the week before he died. He knew George was not the right man for you. He knew it from the first time they met. He never said anything. He wouldn't. He respected your choices, even when he disagreed with them. But he wasn't about to let his family's legacy fall into the hands of a man he didn't trust." Raymond opened the folder and spread the documents across his desk. The first was the original deed to the house, dated 1892. My great-grandfather's name was at the bottom, along with a wax seal that had somehow survived 130 years. The second was a trust document, dated 1986, the Whitfield Family Trust. My father had established it 6 months before he died, transferring ownership of the house and all its contents into an irrevocable trust with me as the sole beneficiary. The third was a codicil, added 3 months later. This one spelled out the conditions of the trust in detail. "Read paragraph 7, Raymond said. I read it aloud. "The property held in this trust shall never become marital property, regardless of any future marriage entered into by the beneficiary. The beneficiary's spouse shall have no claim to the property, whether by divorce, death, or any other circumstance. The property shall remain solely in the name of the beneficiary and her heirs in perpetuity." I looked up at Raymond. He knew. He knew George would try something like this. He suspected. Your father was a careful man. He didn't leave anything to chance. Raymond pulled out another document. "This is the property tax record for the past 38 years. Every payment has come from the trust account. George's name has never appeared on any document related to this property. But George paid bills. I saw him write checks for the utilities, the maintenance. He wrote checks from a joint account that was funded by the trust. He thought he was paying household expenses from household income. He never realized that the money came from a source he had no access to. I sat back in my chair. All these years, all these decades of marriage, and George had never once questioned where the money came from. He had just assumed that because he wrote the checks, he owned the property. What about the furniture, the cars, the investments? The furniture is covered under the trust as contents of the property. The cars are in your name alone. You bought them from your separate account. As for the investments, Raymond smiled. What investments does George think you have? He manages a portfolio. Stocks, bonds, some real estate. He said it was worth about $400,000. George manages a portfolio that belongs to George. Money he earned from his sales career, invested in his name. You have no claim to it, and he has no claim to you. Raymond pulled out one final document. This is your actual investment portfolio, managed by my firm for the past 20 years. Current value, $1.7 million. I stared at the number. That can't be right. Your father left you $200,000 in addition to the house. It's been invested conservatively but consistently for 4 decades. Compound interest is a remarkable thing. I was rich. Not just comfortable, not just secure, but genuinely wealthy. And George had no idea. Had never had any idea. Why didn't you tell me this before? Raymond looked at me with something that might have been sadness. Because you never asked. Because you were happy. Or at least you seemed happy. Because I hoped that George would prove your father wrong. That the marriage would work. That I would never have to show you these documents. But my father knew. Your father knew people. He could read them the way other men read books. He met George twice before the wedding, and he told me afterward that the man had the eyes of a person who counts other people's money. Raymond shook his head. I didn't understand what he meant until years later. I thought about George, about the way he had always been interested in our finances, about the questions he asked about the house, the property, the family wealth he assumed I had access to, about the subtle pressure he had applied over the years to add his name to accounts, to documents, to anything that might give him a legal claim to what was mine. I had always refused, not because I suspected anything, but because my father had told me to never put a man's name on something that belonged to me. I had thought it was old-fashioned advice from a different generation. Now I understood it was protection. What happens now? I asked. Now we file. Raymond gathered the documents and placed them back in the folder. I've already contacted the sheriff's office. In 3 days, Deputy Henderson will serve George with an eviction notice. An eviction notice? Not a legal proceeding? The legal proceeding comes later if he chooses to contest. But the eviction notice is immediate. He has no claim to the property, no rental agreement, no legal right to occupy the premises. As far as the law is concerned, he's a trespasser. What about our marriage? Doesn't that give him any rights? In Georgia, marital property is property acquired during the marriage. The house was acquired in 1892. The trust was established in 1986, a year before you married George. Nothing about your marriage changed the ownership of that property. Raymond leaned forward. Your father was very, very careful, Patricia. He thought of everything. I felt tears threatening again. My father had been dead for 38 years, but he was still protecting me, still looking out for his daughter from beyond the grave. Thank you, I said, for keeping this safe, for waiting until I needed it. Thank your father. I'm just the messenger. I stood up to leave. Raymond walked me to the door of his office. Patricia, he said, there's one more thing. What? George is going to be angry. Very angry. When he realizes what's happened, when he understands that everything he thought he owned was never his, he may become dangerous. Raymond's face was serious. I want you to be careful. Stay at the hotel. Don't go back to the house alone. And if you feel threatened in any way, call the police immediately. You think George would hurt me? I think George has shown you who he really is. A man who throws his wife's clothes in the rain is capable of many things. I nodded. I did not want to believe that George would physically harm me, but I also had not believed he would throw me out of my own home. I had been wrong about a lot of things. I'll be careful, I said. Good. And Patricia? Yes? Your father would be proud of you. For waiting this long. For being patient. For not giving George the satisfaction of knowing what you knew until the perfect moment. I walked out of Raymond's office into the bright Savannah morning. The air smelled like rain and magnolias. The cobblestone streets were still wet from last night's storm. 3 days. In 3 days, George would learn the truth. And then, finally, after 38 years of waiting, I would have my house back. My phone rang. Kevin. Mom, where are you? Dad says you left last night. He says you just walked out. What's going on? I took a deep breath. Can you meet me for lunch? There's something I need to tell you. Is this about Ashley? It's about everything. The house, the marriage, your grandfather, everything. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Okay, Kevin said finally. I'll meet you at the Collins Quarter in an hour. Thank you, honey. Mom, whatever this is, I'm on your side. You know that, right? I smiled. My son. My good, loyal, confused son who was about to learn that his entire understanding of his family was built on a foundation of lies. I know, I said. I'll see you soon. I hung up and started walking toward the restaurant. The sun was warm on my face. The birds were singing in the oak trees. And somewhere across town, George Morgan was waking up in a house that had never belonged to him, with a woman who had no idea what was coming. 2 more days. Just 2 more days. And then the reckoning would begin. Kevin was waiting for me at the Collins Quarter when I arrived. He looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, hair uncombed, wearing the same jacket he had worn to Thanksgiving dinner last year. He stood when he saw me and wrapped me in a hug that lasted longer than usual. Mom, are you okay? I've been worried sick. I'm fine, honey. Better than fine, actually. We sat down at a table in the corner, away from the other diners. I ordered coffee. Kevin ordered whiskey. It was 11 in the morning, but I did not comment. Tell me what happened, he said. Dad's version doesn't make any sense. What did your father tell you? Kevin ran a hand through his hair. He said you had a breakdown. He said you started screaming and throwing things and that he had to ask you to leave for your own safety. He said Ashley was there to help calm things down. I almost laughed. Almost. But the look on Kevin's face stopped me. That's not what happened, I said. I know that's not what happened. I've known Dad was lying about things for years. Kevin's voice was bitter. I just didn't know how much. I told him the truth. About Ashley. About the 18 months I had known about the affair. About the night before. The clothes in the rain. The laughter from the window. The humiliation of being thrown out of my own home. Kevin listened without interrupting. When I finished, his face had gone pale. He threw your clothes in the rain? And she laughed? Yes. And he called it his house? Yes. Kevin was quiet for a long moment. Then he picked up his whiskey and drained it in one swallow. I'm going to kill him. No, you're not. That's not how this works. Mom, he threw you out like garbage. He humiliated you. Kevin stopped. His eyes were wet. You're my mother. You raised me. You sacrificed everything for this family. And he just threw you away. I know. So what are we going to do? I told him about Raymond. About the trust. About the documents that proved George had never owned a single brick of the house he thought was his. Kevin's expression changed as I talked. Confusion gave way to disbelief. Disbelief gave way to something that looked almost like hope. Grandpa set this up? Before he died? Yes. He didn't trust your father. He never said anything to me, but he made sure that no matter what happened, the house would always be mine. And Dad doesn't know? Your father never asked. In 38 years of marriage, he never once looked at a deed or a title or any document related to the property. He just assumed that because he lived there, he owned it. Kevin laughed. It was a harsh sound. Nothing like his usual laugh. That's so like him. Assuming he owns things he never earned. What do you mean? Kevin looked down at the table. There's something I need to tell you, Mom. Something I should have told you years ago. The waitress came to refill our coffee. Kevin waited until she was gone before continuing. 5 years ago, Dad asked me to invest some money for him. He said it was from a business deal, something he didn't want you to know about because it was a surprise. Kevin shook his head. I was stupid. I believed him. I helped him set up an offshore account. What kind of money? A lot of money. $300,000, maybe more. He's been adding to it ever since. My stomach went cold. Where did that money come from? I don't know. He said it was from consulting work, from deals he was doing on the side. But now, Kevin looked at me with guilty eyes. Now I'm not so sure. You think he was stealing from me? I think he was stealing from somewhere. Maybe you, maybe the house maintenance accounts, maybe. Kevin trailed off. I don't know, Mom. I just know that Dad has a lot of money hidden away that he shouldn't have. I thought about the household accounts, the maintenance funds, the insurance payments and property taxes that had been coming from the trust for nearly 4 decades. I had never looked closely at the numbers. I had trusted George to manage the day-to-day finances. What else had I trusted him with? I need to talk to Raymond, I said. He needs to know about this. I'll tell him everything. Names, account numbers, whatever he needs. Kevin's voice was firm. I should have said something years ago. I wanted to believe Dad was who he said he was. I know, honey. I wanted to believe that too. We sat in silence for a moment. The restaurant was filling up with the lunch crowd, lawyers and businessmen and tourists enjoying the Savannah afternoon. Normal people living normal lives. What happens now? Kevin asked. In 2 days, a deputy sheriff is going to knock on the door of the house. He's going to ask your father one question. Who is the legal owner of the property? And Dad won't be able to answer. He won't. Kevin smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. Good. He deserves it. There's something else, I said. When this happens, your father is going to be angry. He might lash out. He might try to contact me, threaten me, do something stupid. I'll handle him. You need to stay away from him too, at least until the legal situation is resolved. I don't want you getting caught in the middle of this. Mom, I'm already in the middle of this. I helped him hide money. I'm probably an accessory to whatever crimes he committed. That's why you need to talk to Raymond. He can help you navigate this legally. Make sure you're protected. Kevin nodded. He looked older than his 36 years. The weight of his father's betrayal was aging him in real time. I'm sorry, Mom, for all of it. For not seeing what Dad was really like. For helping him without asking questions. For not being there for you when you needed me. You're here now. That's what matters. Is it enough? I reached across the table and took his hand. It's a start. We finished our lunch and walked out into the afternoon sun. The streets of Savannah were bustling with activity, horse-drawn carriages, tour groups, locals going about their daily business. Where are you staying? Kevin asked. The Marriott on Bay Street. Let me drive you. I'd rather walk. I need time to think. Kevin hugged me again. Call me if you need anything. Anything at all. I will. I watched him walk to his car, shoulders hunched, hands in his pockets. My son. My good son, who had made bad choices because he wanted to believe in a father who did not deserve his faith. The walk back to the hotel took me through the historic district. Past the squares with their fountains and monuments. Past the churches with their tall steeples. Past the houses that had stood for 100 years or more. Witnesses to everything Savannah had survived. My house was one of those witnesses. Built by my great-grandfather. Maintained by my grandfather. Loved by my father. And now, finally, about to be returned to me. I thought about the 38 years I had spent in that house with George. The dinners we had shared. The holidays we had celebrated. The quiet evenings when I thought we were building a life together. All of it had been a lie. George had never loved me. He had loved what he thought I could give him. A home, a legacy, a comfortable life he had not earned. But I was not going to mourn what I had lost. I was going to celebrate what I was about to gain. Freedom, independence, a future that belonged to me alone. One more day, just one more day. And then George Morgan would learn what it felt like to lose everything. The knock came at 6:17 a.m. I was not there to see it. Raymond had advised me to stay away, to let the official process unfold without my presence. But Kevin was there, parked across the street in his car, watching. He called me the moment it began. They're at the door, he said. Deputy Henderson and another officer. I sat up in my hotel bed, phone pressed to my ear. What's happening? Dad just opened the door. He looks confused. Ashley is behind him in her robe. I could picture it. George in his pajamas, hair disheveled from sleep, squinting at the unexpected visitors. Ashley hovering behind him, suspicious and annoyed. The deputy is showing him something. Papers, I think. Dad is reading them. He looks like he doesn't understand. He doesn't understand, I said. He never understood anything. Wait. The deputy is saying something. I can't hear from here, but Dad's face just changed. Kevin paused. Mom, he looks like he's going to be sick. What's the deputy saying? I'm going to get closer. Hold on. I heard the sound of a car door opening, footsteps on pavement. Kevin's breathing was quick, nervous. Okay, I can hear them now. The deputy is asking. He's asking who the legal owner of the property is. Dad is trying to answer, but he's stuttering. He keeps saying, I own this house. And the deputy keeps saying, Sir, that's not what our records show. I closed my eyes. 38 years. 38 years of George assuming, never questioning, never bothering to verify the most basic fact about the roof over his head. Ashley is screaming now, Kevin continued. She's calling the deputy names, saying this is harassment, saying she's going to sue. The deputy is ignoring her. What about your father? He's just standing there. He looks like he doesn't know where he is, like he's having a dream and can't wake up. Kevin's voice went quiet. Mom, he just collapsed. He's on the ground. Ashley is screaming for someone to call an ambulance. I felt nothing. I expected to feel something, satisfaction perhaps, or vindication. But there was only a hollow emptiness where my feelings should have been. Is he okay? I don't know. The deputies are calling for medical assistance. Ashley is crying now. She keeps saying, This can't be happening. This can't be happening. Stay there. Tell me what happens. For the next 15 minutes, Kevin narrated the scene. An ambulance arrived. George was loaded onto a stretcher, conscious but dazed. Ashley tried to get in the ambulance with him but was told she could not. She's alone on the porch now, Kevin said. The deputies gave her the papers and left. She's just standing there, reading them over and over. What do the papers say? They're copies of the deed, the trust documents, and an eviction notice. The notice gives her 72 hours to vacate the premises. Kevin paused. Mom, she's crying. Real tears. I don't think she knew. She didn't know. George never told her the truth about anything. What do you want me to do? Nothing. Go to the hospital if you want. Check on your father. But don't engage with Ashley, and don't come to my hotel. I don't want either of them knowing where I am. Okay, I'll call you after I talk to Dad. I hung up the phone and sat in silence. It was done. After 38 years of waiting, of hoping, of pretending that my marriage was something other than what it was finally done. George Morgan had learned the truth. The house was not his. It had never been his. Everything he thought he owned, everything he thought he had built, was a fiction he had created in his own mind. And now that fiction had collapsed, taking him with it. I ordered room service, eggs, toast, coffee, and ate by the window, watching the sun rise over the Savannah River. The ships were moving again, the same slow procession I had watched every morning since arriving at this hotel. Life continuing, indifferent to the dramas playing out in its midst. Kevin called again at noon. Dad's okay. They're keeping him for observation. They think he had a panic attack, not a heart attack. But he's stable. Did you talk to him? Briefly. He's not making a lot of sense. He keeps asking how this happened, how he lived in that house for 38 years and never knew. What did you tell him? I told him the truth, that Grandpa set up the trust before he died, that you've known about it the whole time, that he has no legal claim to anything. I could imagine George's face, the confusion, the betrayal, the dawning realization that the woman he had dismissed as weak and stupid had been playing a longer game than he ever imagined. How did he react? He cried. I've never seen Dad cry before, Mom. Not at Grandpa's funeral, not at Grandma's. But he cried today. I did not feel sorry for him. I could not feel sorry for him. A man who throws his wife's clothes in the rain does not deserve sympathy. What about Ashley? Gone. I drove by the house an hour ago. Her car was gone. Most of her stuff was gone. She took what she could carry and left. Smart girl. Mom, that's not... Kevin stopped himself. Yeah, I guess it is. What happens now? Raymond is filing the formal eviction papers today. Dad has 72 hours from when the notice was served to vacate the property. After that, the sheriff can physically remove him. Will he fight it? He says he will. He keeps talking about getting a lawyer, contesting the trust, proving that Grandpa was mentally incompetent when he signed the documents. Kevin's voice was flat. Raymond says he doesn't have a chance. The trust is ironclad. Grandpa knew exactly what he was doing. Yes, he did. There was a long silence on the line. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you stay all those years, knowing what you knew about the house, about the trust? Why didn't you just leave? It was a fair question, one I had asked myself many times over the years. Because I loved him, I said. Or I thought I did. I hoped that he would change, that our marriage would become what I wanted it to be. I kept waiting for the George I fell in love with to come back, but he never did. He never did. And eventually, I realized he never would. I looked out the window at the river. The night he threw me out, I finally understood. He was never going to change. He was never going to see me as anything other than an obstacle. So I stopped waiting and started acting. And the phone call? The one you made that night? That was to Raymond. I told him it was time to execute the plan we had discussed years ago. He had been ready for this moment since the day I got married. Kevin was quiet for a moment. Grandpa really didn't trust Dad, did he? No, honey, he didn't. And he was right not to. After I hung up with Kevin, I called Raymond. It's done, he said. The eviction notice has been served. George has 72 hours to leave the property. What if he refuses? Then the sheriff will remove him. Physically, if necessary. But I don't think it will come to that. George is not a fighter, Patricia. He's a schemer. And schemers always look for the easy way out. What's the easy way out in this situation? He'll try to negotiate. He'll call you, or have his lawyer call me, and he'll offer some kind of deal. He'll give up his claim to the house in exchange for something. Money, probably, or a share of your investments. And what do I say? You say no. You say no to everything. George has no leverage here. The house is yours. The investments are yours. He has nothing to offer and nothing to threaten. What about the money Kevin told you about? The hidden accounts? Raymond's voice went cold. That's a separate matter. I've already contacted a forensic accountant. If George has been embezzling from the trust, we'll find it. And we'll prosecute. I thought about George lying in a hospital bed, his world crumbling around him. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for him. Part of me wanted to believe that somewhere inside that selfish, scheming man was the person I had fallen in love with 40 years ago. But that person had never existed. He had been a fiction, a mask George wore to get what he wanted. And now the mask was off. Thank you, Raymond, I said, for everything. Thank me when it's over. We still have work to do. He was right. The eviction was just the beginning. There would be lawyers and court dates and negotiations. There would be George's attempts to salvage something from the wreckage of his schemes. But I was not afraid. I had Raymond. I had Kevin. I had the truth on my side. And in 72 hours, I would have my house back. That evening, I sat by the window and watched the sunset paint the river in shades of orange and gold. The ships were still moving. The birds were still singing. The world was still turning. And for the first time in 38 years, I was free. Not completely free. Not yet. But close enough to taste it. Close enough to believe that the future I had dreamed about for so long was finally within reach. One more day, and then I could go home. And this time, I would be going alone. George checked himself out of the hospital the next morning. I learned this from Kevin, who had been keeping watch on his father's movements. George took a taxi to the house, packed what he could fit in his car, and drove to a motel on the outskirts of the city. He looks terrible, Kevin said when he called. Like he hasn't slept. Like he's aged 10 years in 2 days. Where's Ashley? Nobody knows. Her phone is disconnected. Her apartment is empty. She vanished. Good. One less complication. What about his lawyer? Has he contacted Raymond? This morning. He's trying to set up a meeting. Says George wants to negotiate. What does Raymond say? Raymond says we should take the meeting. He wants to see what George has to offer. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to refuse, to let George suffer without any chance of redemption. But Raymond was right. It was better to know what George was planning than to be surprised by it later. Set up the meeting, I said, but I want to be there. I want to look George in the eye when he realizes there's no way out. The meeting was scheduled for 3 o'clock at Raymond's office. George arrived with his lawyer, a young man I did not recognize. He looked nervous, out of his depth. George looked worse than Kevin had described. His face was gray, his eyes bloodshot. He had not shaved in days, and his clothes hung loose on his frame. The collapse in front of the deputies had taken something out of him. Good. We sat on opposite sides of Raymond's conference table. George did not look at me. He stared at his hands, at the table, at the wall, anywhere but at my face. Thank you for agreeing to meet, George's lawyer began. My client would like to discuss a possible resolution to this unfortunate situation. There's nothing to discuss, Raymond said. The property belongs to Mrs. Morgan. Your client has no legal claim to it. We're not disputing ownership. We understand that the house is held in trust. The lawyer cleared his throat. However, my client has lived in that property for 38 years. He has contributed to its maintenance and upkeep. He believes he is entitled to some compensation for those contributions. Compensation? I spoke for the first time. My voice was calm, steady. You want me to pay George for living in my house? George finally looked at me. His eyes were red-rimmed, desperate. Patricia, please. I have nothing. Ashley is gone. The house is gone. Everything I thought I had. His voice cracked. I'm 65 years old. I can't start over with nothing. You should have thought of that before you threw my clothes in the rain. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. I let Ashley convince me that... He stopped, shook his head. It doesn't matter what I was thinking. What I did was unforgivable. But please, Patricia, 38 years, doesn't that count for something? I looked at this man I had married, this man I had loved, or thought I had loved, this man who had taken everything I offered and given nothing in return. Do you remember our wedding day, George? He blinked. What? Our wedding day, June 14th, 1987. Do you remember what you said to me? Patricia, I don't see what this has to do with... You said you would love me forever. You said you would take care of me. You said that everything that was mine was yours, and everything that was yours was mine. I leaned forward. Do you remember that? Yes, I remember. You lied. You never loved me. You loved what you thought I could give you, and when you decided I had nothing left to offer, you threw me out like garbage and replaced me with a woman half your age. George's face crumpled. Patricia, don't. I held up my hand. Don't try to apologize. Don't try to explain. You had 38 years to be the man you promised to be, and you failed. You failed every single day. The room was silent. George's lawyer looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Raymond cleared his throat. Mrs. Morgan, perhaps we should discuss the practical matters. Yes, let's. I turned to George's lawyer. Here is what I am willing to offer. George can take his personal belongings, his clothes, his golf clubs, whatever else belongs to him alone. He will sign a document renouncing any claim to the house or its contents. In exchange, I will not pursue criminal charges for the money he embezzled from the trust accounts. George's head snapped up. Embezzled? I never... $347,000, George. That's how much you stole over the past 15 years. Skimming from the maintenance accounts, redirecting tax payments, creating invoices for repairs that never happened. I smiled. Did you think I wouldn't find out? George's face went white. His lawyer looked equally shocked. That money was for us, for our retirement. I was putting it aside. You were putting it aside in accounts I didn't know about. In investments I had no access to. With the help of a son you convinced to keep your secrets. I shook my head. You weren't saving for retirement, George. You were stealing from me. And you were using Kevin to do it. Kevin told you? Kevin told Raymond, and Raymond has documented everything. I gestured to the folder in front of my lawyer. Bank records, wire transfers, offshore accounts. It's all there, George. Every penny you took. The room was very quiet. Here is what is going to happen, I continued. You are going to sign the documents Raymond has prepared. You are going to surrender any claim to my property, my money, my life. In exchange, I will not press charges. You will leave Savannah with whatever you can carry, and you will never contact me again. And if I don't, then I go to the police. I show them the evidence of your embezzlement, and you spend whatever years you have left in prison. I looked at him. You're 65 years old, George. How long do you think you'd survive in a Georgia state prison? George stared at me. I watched the calculations happening behind his eyes, the weighing of options, the search for some way out. There was no way out. He knew it. I knew it. Everyone in the room knew it. I need to think about this, he said finally. You have until 6 o'clock tonight. After that, the offer expires. Raymond slid a document across the table. The agreement is here. Sign it, and this is over. Walk away clean. George's lawyer leaned in and whispered something. George shook his head. The lawyer whispered again, more urgently. Finally, George reached for the pen. I hate you, he said as he signed. I hate what you've done to me. You did this to yourself, George. I just let you. He signed every page. His lawyer witnessed. Raymond notarized. When it was done, George stood up. He looked at me one last time, and I saw something in his eyes that might have been regret. I did love you, he said. In the beginning. I want you to know that. I believe you, I said. But somewhere along the way, you stopped. And you never told me. You just kept taking and taking until there was nothing left. George left without another word. His lawyer hurried after him, already on the phone, probably trying to figure out how to salvage something from the wreckage of his client's life. I sat in the conference room, listening to the silence. It's done, Raymond said. He signed everything. The house is yours. The money is protected. George Morgan has no legal claim to anything. What about Ashley? Could she cause problems? I doubt it. She's probably halfway across the country by now, looking for her next mark. Women like Ashley don't stick around when the money disappears. I nodded. It was strange. I had expected to feel triumphant, victorious. But all I felt was tired. What happens now? Now you go home. The eviction period ends at midnight tonight. After that, you can move back into your house whenever you're ready. My house. After 38 years of sharing it with a man who never deserved it, it was finally mine again. Thank you, Raymond. For everything. Thank your father. He's the one who made this possible. I stood up to leave. At the door, I turned back. Raymond? When you see Kevin, tell him I'm proud of him. Tell him that coming forward took courage, and that I don't blame him for what George made him do. I'll tell him. He's been worried about how you'd react. Tell him to come see me. Tomorrow. At the house. Raymond smiled. I will. I walked out of his office into the late afternoon sun. The streets of Savannah were busy with the evening rush, people heading home from work, tourists exploring the historic district, the ordinary rhythms of a city that had seen so many stories like mine. Tomorrow I would go home. Tomorrow I would start the process of reclaiming my life. But tonight, I was going to do something I had not done in years. I was going to sleep peacefully, knowing that the worst was finally over. I returned to my house on a Friday morning. The October sun was bright, the air crisp with the first hint of autumn. The oak trees along Forsyth Park were starting to turn, their leaves shifting from green to gold. The Spanish moss hung heavy from their branches, swaying gently in the breeze. Kevin drove me. He had insisted, and I had not argued. After everything that had happened, it felt right to have him there. We pulled up to the wrought iron gates, the same gates my grandfather had commissioned 70 years ago. They were open, waiting for me. Raymond had arranged for a locksmith to change all the locks the day before. Are you ready? Kevin asked. I've been ready for 38 years. We walked up the driveway together. The grass was overgrown. George had clearly not bothered with maintenance once he knew the house was not his. The flower beds were choked with weeds. The wraparound porch needed painting. It did not matter. These were problems that could be fixed. The house itself was still standing, still solid, still beautiful in the way that only old Savannah houses can be. I climbed the porch steps and stood at the front door, the same door I had walked through on my wedding day. The same door I had been thrown out of less than a week ago. Kevin handed me the key, new brass, shiny and untouched. "Go ahead, Mom. It's yours." I put the key in the lock and turned it. The door swung open. The house smelled different, stale, unfamiliar. Ashley's perfume still lingered in the air, a sickly sweet scent that made my stomach turn. George's cigars, the particular mustiness of a house that had been neglected, but underneath all of that, I could still smell home. The old wood of the floors, the faint trace of my mother's cooking that seemed to have seeped into the walls decades ago, the particular quality of the light coming through the tall windows. I walked through the rooms slowly, taking inventory. The living room was mostly intact, though Ashley had rearranged the furniture in ways I did not like. The dining room was missing several pieces. George must have sold them. The kitchen was a mess, dishes piled in the sink, trash overflowing. Upstairs, the master bedroom was the worst. Ashley had redecorated completely. New bedding, new curtains, new everything. My things were gone, replaced by cheap furniture and garish decorations. "She has terrible taste," Kevin said from the doorway. I laughed. It was the first real laugh I had managed in days. "Yes, she does." I stood in the center of the room and looked around. This was where I had slept for nearly 4 decades. This was where I had woken up next to a man I thought I knew. This was where Ashley had laughed at me from the window while my clothes soaked in the rain below. "I want it all gone," I said. "Every piece of furniture she brought, every decoration she hung. I want this room to be mine again. I'll call someone. Get it taken care of today." "Thank you, honey." We spent the rest of the morning going through the house. Kevin made lists of what was missing, what was damaged, what needed to be replaced. I made my own list, not of things, but of memories. Places where important moments had happened. Corners where I had sat and cried when no one was watching. Windows where I had stood and wondered if this was all my life would ever be. Around noon, Kevin went out to get lunch. I stayed behind, wandering through the empty rooms. In my father's old study, I found something I had not expected. George's clothes. A pile of them, stuffed into trash bags and left in the corner. Suits and shirts and ties, all jumbled together without care. I picked up one of the bags and carried it to the front porch. Then I went back for another, and another, until all of George's clothes were piled on the porch, exactly where mine had been a week ago. Then I sat down in one of the rocking chairs and waited. The rain started around 2 o'clock. A light drizzle at first, then heavier. The kind of October rain that soaks through everything in minutes. I watched George's clothes get wet, his expensive suits, his silk ties, his imported Italian shoes. All of it soaking in the rain, just like my things had soaked. Kevin returned with sandwiches and found me still sitting there. "Mom, what are you doing?" "Watching the rain." He looked at the pile of wet clothes. Understanding dawned on his face. "You're leaving them there." "Yes." "Just like he left yours." "Yes." Kevin sat down in the chair beside me. We ate our sandwiches and watched the rain fall on George's belongings. Neither of us said anything. There was nothing that needed to be said. By evening, the rain had stopped. The clothes were ruined, same as mine had been. I had Kevin put them in trash bags and leave them at the curb for collection. George would never see them again. He would never know what had happened to his things, but I would know, and that was enough. The next few weeks were busy. I hired contractors to repair the damage George's neglect had caused. I bought new furniture to replace what Ashley had destroyed. I repainted the master bedroom in colors I had always wanted. Soft blues and creams, peaceful and calm. Kevin came by every day to help. We did not talk much about George. There was nothing left to say. He had signed away his rights, taken his car and whatever cash he had left, and disappeared somewhere into Florida. Last I heard, he was living in a rented room in Jacksonville, working as a used car salesman. Ashley was never seen again. Raymond heard rumors that she had moved to California, found another wealthy man, started the cycle over again. I did not care. She was no longer my problem. Thanksgiving came. Kevin brought his girlfriend, a lovely woman named Sarah, who worked as a nurse at the hospital. We cooked dinner together in my newly renovated kitchen, using recipes that had been in my family for generations. "This house is amazing," Sarah said as we sat down to eat. "Kevin told me it's been in your family for over 100 years. 132 years, I said. "My great-grandfather built it in 1892. And you've lived here your whole life?" "Most of it. I was born in this house. I plan to die in this house." I smiled. Though hopefully not for a long time yet. After dinner, Kevin and Sarah went for a walk around Forsyth Park. I stayed behind, washing dishes, looking out the window at the garden I would replant in the spring. My father had been right. He had seen George for what he really was, and he had protected me even after he was gone. The trust, the documents, the careful legal structures, all of it had been his way of saying, "I love you," from beyond the grave. I wished I could thank him. I wished I could tell him that his faith in me had not been misplaced, that I had survived, that I had won. But he already knew. Somehow, I was sure he already knew. Christmas was quiet. Just Kevin and Sarah and me, sitting by the fire, watching the lights on the tree. We did not talk about George. We did not talk about the past. We talked about the future. Kevin's plans to propose to Sarah in the spring, my plans to renovate the garden, the possibility of grandchildren someday. New Year's Eve, I stood on the porch and watched the fireworks over Forsyth Park. The same porch where George had thrown my clothes into the rain. The same porch where I had left his clothes to soak in return. But I was not thinking about George. I was thinking about my father. About my grandfather. About all the Whitfields who had lived in this house before me and all the ones who would live hereafter. I was 62 years old. I had been married for 38 years to a man who never deserved me. I had been thrown out of my own home and forced to fight to get it back. But I had won. Not just the house, not just the money, but something more important. I had won my freedom. The fireworks faded. The new year began. I went inside, locked the door behind me, and climbed the stairs to my bedroom. My bedroom. My house. My life. For the first time in nearly 4 decades, everything was exactly as it should be. And as I fell asleep that night, I smiled. Because the house that George Morgan thought was his had never belonged to him at all. It had always been mine. It would always be mine. And there was nothing anyone could ever do to take it from me again.